Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I am excited for this next topic. And before I dive in, I just want to give a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the cannabis industry back in 2009. I was running and operating vertically integrated cannabis facilities in Denver, Colorado. And in 2015, I founded my company, ICS Consulting, and I have been helping cannabis operators navigate the regulatory landscape across the United States for the last 10 years. Today's topic is common inventory track and trace mistakes that put cannabis operators at risk. I thought this was a very timely topic. It's January, it's the beginning of quarter one. It's a good time to do a reset in your business, especially in a regulated business like we have in the cannabis industry. And today I'm going to be focusing more on Metrc, as Metrc is a seed to sale tracking system all across the US. Like maybe 75% to 80% of the market, they are using Metrc seed to sale inventory tracking software. In other states, they are using BioTrack. And then also in some states, they have created their own seed to sale tracking software. But I'm going to be focusing on Metrc today for inventory track and trace. First, I want to start if your Metrc inventory doesn't match what's on your floor or in your cultivation facility or in your manufacturing facility. You don't have a Metrc problem, but you really have a compliance risk. And a couple things that I'm going to be talking about today is what seed to sale actually means in practice, as well as the most common Metrc mistakes that I see during audits, why small errors turn into big violations, and how operators can protect their license. So Metrc's just not data entry, it's regulatory evidence. If you think about it, it's a state mandated tracking software. If you are making mistakes over and over again, and then the regulators come in and they audit your facility, I want to break it into different categories. One, we have people who break the rules and regulations a lot. For example, they might not even be using Metrc 100% in their facility. They could have a lot of product or plants that aren't even tagged. They could have trash bags of product that's untagged. This is pretty, I wouldn't say common, but I read a lot of the violations across the United States, and I'm always studying what's going on with inventory tracking. What are people struggling with? What are some of these violations? Obviously, when people have trash bags or hiding product or trying to go under the radar, things are going out the back door. These are not good players in the industry. And then you have people who are just everyday operators who make mistakes, right? They maybe fall behind in their training, or they really didn't understand exactly how to use the system correctly, and then they make mistakes, or there's a lot of employee turnover and those employees didn't get trained properly. I'm going to talk about all the different things that could potentially happen in your seed to sale tracking software. But there's a lot of things. And I feel like for those operators, they're not waking up and saying, hey, let's go break the law today. Let's go intentionally not be in compliance. But they just don't always have the best systems in place, or they're not getting enough help, or they're overwhelmed, or there's a lot of turnover. And just they're having common issues in their facility versus somebody who's intentionally breaking the law and they're intentionally trying to divert product. Because at the end of the day, if you have garbage bags and garbage bags of untagged product, then you have a massive issue going on in your facility. And a lot of times, even those issues can stem from operators where the ownership team, they don't even live in that state, and they have turned their operation fully over to employees, and there's really no checks or balances happening in those facilities. And also could be ownership has a lack of knowledge of the seed to sale tracking system. So one tip I'd like to give, if you're an owner in the cannabis industry and you have a seed to sale tracking system, I would say your first thing that you should do is work in your facility 100%, do every single job that your cannabis operation has, every single job at every single level. You should learn how to grow, how to trim, how to package, how to use Metrc system, how to work in the dispensary, how to bring in customers, how to use Metrc for the dispensary and accept manifests, all these things. You should work every single position that all your staff has to work, whether you're good at it or not. It really just doesn't even matter. So you can have a deeper understanding for what's going on in your operation. People who I work with who go in and make sure they know how to work every single position have like the best success because they know everything that's going on in their facility. They can log on remotely anywhere, get into their POS system, log on to their Metrc system or their ERP or whatever platforms people use for cultivation and manufacturing. And they can look at their numbers, they can look at results and know exactly what's going on in the facility where they're not completely vulnerable to where there's no checks and balances that they have in place with their staff who are essentially are going to be running these facilities. A good chunk of the time, it's not all owners that are running these facilities. A lot of times it's managers, employees. It's not always an owner in there. In some cases, in new emerging markets, we do know that owners work, or if it's a brand new dispensary, you have to learn every position. That's my one takeaway I want to give everyone listening today. If you're going to be launching a facility or you're buying a facility or license, you have to learn every single position in the facility so you understand what's going on in your business. And the piece that I talked about, the regulatory evidence, that's evidence with you not being in compliance. And this is where the violations stem from. Even if you're just a regular operator who's not saying, hey, let's go break some rules today, there's lots of licensed cannabis facilities in the United States who did not intentionally mean to break the law. But here's the one thing I always say when I do this podcast: you're in the regulated cannabis industry. As an owner operator, it's your job to understand all the compliance that comes with running this business, understanding the regulatory aspect and the landscape of this business, which can be a challenge because you're not only do you have the regulatory layer, we have it, the cannabis layer, and then you're working on the business and in the business. Maybe you own multiple companies and you have a lot of things going on. So a lot of it compiles and then a lot of cracks start happening and there's not the right structure in place. And so just a lot of things can happen. So that tracking system is the state's evidence on your compliance health in your business. And are you at a high level? Are you striving for compliance excellence? Or are you just a little bit under the radar and really don't want to be under the microscope? Not everybody wants to go out and do this one task that I do, which is I read cannabis violations across the United States. I've been doing this for years. And now, because the way the internet works, it is a lot easier to find these violations or these show cause orders where you're not having to go request public records, and you can go on to a state's website and you have to do some digging, but most will have their administrative actions on there. It's really helpful because you can see what people are doing, what mistakes are happening. I do it so I can make sure I'm supporting my clients in the best possible way that I can. and that I'm coming up with solutions for the cannabis industry. What issues are they running into, and how can I help, and how can I educate, and how can I support the industry better by doing my research and keeping my finger on the pulse for what I do in my business. The number one violation in the United States in the cannabis industry is data entry errors in the seed to sale tracking systems. That's the number one violation. And I think it was a couple episodes ago, one violation I was reading, which I believe was for December of 2025 in Colorado, was a $40,000. I said that $40,000 a violation relating to Metrc, the seed to sale tracking system. And a lot of it was items weren't tagged. Some things didn't have any tags. They weren't tagged properly, and they weren't even tracking properly. And I see this in every state. This is a common issue, especially when there's diversion going on and there's an investigation. And you could just tell the ones that get revoked, those are the ones, a lot of the time, they're just not using the seed to sale tracking system properly, and there's diversion going on. Or inversion. Diversion or inversion going on in that state. And so they're very fascinating to read and very helpful. Who knows, maybe everyone's going to clean up their act this year in 2026, or maybe data entry is going to continue to be a problem. I like to give context in case there's anyone listening that is like, what is seed to sale tracking? So seed to sale tracking, it's basically a tracking software that tracks the chain of custody for cannabis. I'm just going to be referring to Metrc right now. They have tags, which are RFID tracked radio frequency, very similar to Amazon or FedEx, or these big warehouses and manufacturing facilities actually use RFID tracking. It's common. It is not a cannabis thing. It is very widely used across the United States. And it sends off a radio frequency, and it can track as the product moves throughout the facility or moves throughout the processes. For example, we have a cultivation facility. We have plants, they're seed, and then they're clone. Clones typically aren't tracked until they're getting ready to go into veg. Every state is different, but a common number could be anywhere from 8 inches in height or 5 inches in width. Once that plant becomes that size, then it has to get tagged and tracked. Prior to that, when it's a clone or people are popping seeds, those aren't really tracked because sometimes they die and they don't end up getting used. But once it becomes a certain size, that plant's going to go into veg, and then it gets tracked in the vegetative state. And then it's now going to go into the flowering room, and it's going to be in that cycle. Once it's done in flowering, it's then going to move to the harvest cycle. But there's a lot of things that happen in all those different cycles and phases. A lot of times every cultivation facility and grower out there, everyone has their own unique style and how they like to grow their plants, right? They might manicure and lollipop, and where there's really nothing but a couple leaves and a bud on the plant, they might lollipop all the way up to where it's just tops. Everyone has a different system and how they want to grow their plants and how much they defoliate and trim back of all the leaves. And so all that gets recorded in Metrc because of waste, right? You're growing the plant and you're tracking that, and then you're tracking whatever you're taking away from the plant. So if that's going to get wasted, that's going to get tracked. And then whatever you're harvesting from that plant. And then when you go in, once you harvest, you're going to separate everything. So you're going to be separating all the buds. And then those buds could be getting broken down into 3 different categories, which could be top, middle, and low for your tiers, depending on what you're selling at your cultivation facility. So you have your popcorn buds, you have your B grade, and then you have your A grade, which, is top shelf. And then you have all your waste. You have your root ball, you have your stalks, and you have all the leaves that you're throwing away, all those things. That all gets wasted and tracked. And then you have your wet weights, right? You're going to weigh the plant wet, and those wet weights are going to get tracked before the plant gets dried. and cured, and then you have a different weight. And so it's all getting piecemealed out. It all gets separated in different categories, and that's getting tracked. And then also when we get into the manufacturing side, obviously they're getting raw materials. They're buying from the cultivation facility. That cultivation facility just separated maybe their bulk trim, right? They took all that sugar leaf and they're selling that to the manufacturers, or they're selling fresh frozen. You have the manufacturing facilities that will purchase fresh frozen because they might be blasting concentrates, or they're buying trim, and you're getting that raw material in, and it's going to become something else. So it depends on the rules and regulations in your state, what you're allowed to do, what not to do. When it's at the cultivation facility, it's on a plant tag. But once it goes to the manufacturing facility or the dispensary, it is on a package tag. Plant tags is a tag that's only for the cultivation facility, and it's tracking the plant. Once it gets ready to be shipped or created for wholesale, that cultivation facility has to then transfer it to the package tag. It becomes a package tag. And then when they receive it at the dispensaries or the manufacturing facility, it will be on a package tag. But those are some good examples. Also, seed to sale, like I said, it was a chain of custody. It's the regulator's lens into your operation. They reach out to Metrc and they request the information, and Metrc hands it over to them. That's just what it is. Metrc does not call up the regulators and say, hey, I'm seeing this weird stuff in there. It's up to the regulators to say, hey, we're looking for information. This is what we're looking for. Do I know if the regulators have access and they're logging in and there's a back end? I don't know anything concrete that a regulator has told me directly. I've heard a lot of different rumors that they do and that they're in there in the back end, and then there's an alert. But then when I talk to Metrc, that's not really happening. This is something that depends on your state. Each state has a contract with Metrc. And that's why for anyone who works in multiple states, I work all across the United States, there is a universal Metrc guide, and then each state has a supplemental guide. So Michigan has one, Colorado, we have a supplemental guide, Missouri has one. Every state will have its own supplemental guide, and that's really tied to the rule set and what they're expecting, and that's where the system is more customized for that state and all the specific steps that are just for that state. Also, physical inventory. Another tip I'd like to throw in there. Physical inventory, this is where I see people really just like hurting themselves. And the whole thing about this is having really good systems in place and structure. It's a lifesaver. It's interesting. You'll go into some facilities and the Metrc system or their inventory systems that they have implemented are just seamless, clean and seamless. They don't have any issues. And these people that have these really clean and no inventory issues, they're reconciling every day. They're doing physical inventory every day. They're making sure that all the packages are closed out. There's somebody in there full time addressing inventory issues at all times. And they're really on top of their inventory control. But that doesn't happen in every facility in every state, unfortunately. Some of these businesses, they have people, they're not properly trained or they don't have the right systems in place. Physical inventory is everything. I worked at a facility where we had to do it twice a day. We were open from 8 a.m. to 8 o'clock at night every day, and we had to come in and do inventory in the mornings and do inventory once we closed. This was the adult use side. It was really intense, really intense. I have to say we had incredible inventory control. Another good thing for inventory control is if you're on the dispensary side, the deli style, this is where everyone runs into issues. Every time you open that jar, depending on what state you're in, Colorado is very dry. Every time you have deli style and you're opening these jars, you're losing moisture all the time. Buds fall on the floor. Bud tenders are rushed and they're not paying attention. I've been a bud tender. I know what it's like to be behind the counter and have a line of people waiting to get into the store and to be served. You're just going through the sale and you're trying to get to the next customer, and things happen. You're not paying attention. Buds fall on the floor. All kinds of crazy things happen. And so there's not really good inventory control. And so when you're doing prepackaged, you have way better inventory control. And I feel like a lot of people don't like the pre-pack, but there's a way that you can do it in your dispensary where, you're not having prepackaged flower sitting there for 2 to 3 weeks. That's what people really hate. They don't want something that's not fresh and not sitting around. And are they getting exactly what they're seeing in the jar? And of course, that's why people like deli style, because they're actually watching it come out of the jar that they're purchasing, that they know that's when they get home, they open up that container, that's what's going to be in it. And so it is a challenge. And then some states don't even have the challenge because they're all pre-packed. Make sure you have a really good system in place. And if you have a lot of SKUs, which I've worked in facilities where we had 7 or 8 POS stations, 5,000 square foot dispensary, 100 customers an hour, it's a lot. So you can just do a category audit, right? Mondays is flour, Tuesdays is concentrates, Wednesdays you're going to be doing edibles and drinks, maybe Thursdays all your tinctures and salves and lotions and all that other stuff. So there is a way to not make it so overwhelming and trying to get it all done in one day, especially if you have a huge amount of inventory and you have a lot of POS systems. And we're talking about the dispensaries that are bringing in up to $1 million a month. They're running through a lot of product. The number one Metrc mistake is inventory mismatch. So physical inventory doesn't match Metrc. This is why you have to have physical inventory counts daily in your facility, because what happens, let's say you do it once a month, you are going to be in a world of hurt and pain, let me tell you. If you're a really busy dispensary and you get a lot of product in, you're getting product in every week, right? And you're blowing through tons of product, you're going to be in a world of pain because your system's going to be backed up. You're going to have a lot of issues. And what's going to happen is the issues they're just going to stack on. I see it all the time. I do inventory cleans. I go into these facilities and I clean up these inventory systems that have been backed up. Some of them as long as 4 years. A cultivation facility, it took us like 6 months to go in and just clean up the whole entire thing. 4 years doing harvests every day. It was really wild stuff. And not only that, just because they had a lot of the product just sitting there and never went to testing, it just sat there. And they had a grower in there that actually was doing Metrc wrong for 3-4 years. And this is common. This is not even something I'm making up. It's really fascinating. There are people, I have heard horror story after horror story of an employee telling an owner, I actually didn't know what I was doing in Metrc this whole time. I had no idea what I was doing, which is just really wild stuff because sometimes I don't think people understand the gravity. And I think when it doesn't really affect you, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to not care. And basically, you're screwing over that facility if you're not properly trained. And as an employee, you have access to all the free training that you can get your hands on. They have a complete learning center. You can't say that, oh, they won't pay for it. There's lots of free training. And so everyone should be getting trained. The mistakes that operators make, like I said, the physical inventory is not matching up. The staff assumes they'll fix it later. This is like unbelievably common. These are all the things I hear every time I go in and do an audit. I'm telling you, it just piles on everyone. Adjustments pile up instead of being corrected immediately. During my Metrc audit, I'll find, oh my gosh, probably like sometimes up to 100 to 200 adjustments that need to be fixed or corrected. Or I'll go in and run reports for a whole year and show an owner an adjustment report and say, did you know that your employees are making 500-gram adjustments? And they're in shock. They're like, holy cow. They made a 500-gram adjustment? And meanwhile, who knows? Maybe they're doing an investigation on you because you're not even paying attention. You're not even running reports. in your metric to find out what your staff is doing and the adjustments that they're making. And so it's just really important to eyes wide open so you understand these big adjustments and no support ticket. Anything over 200 grams, this is how I feel as a compliance person and what I like to train people I work with. Anything over 200 grams, you want to reach out to Metrc and be transparent and let them know. They're not there to throw you under the bus. Everyone's so scared. They're so scared to reach out to Metrc and they don't want to be transparent. And it's so fascinating how regulated cannabis still creates this fear and people just don't even want to communicate with Metrc because they're afraid it's going to bring the regulators and they just want to avoid anyone coming in their facility. And they don't want to trigger an audit and they don't want to trigger anyone to come in. But do not be afraid of Metrc. They are there to support you. And in each state in Metrc, they have a Colorado rep, they have a Michigan rep, they have a Missouri rep, right? And you can get their email and you can say, hey, I was in doing some work in our Metrc account. I have a 200 gram adjustment. Do I need to do a support ticket? And you can also ask the rep in your state, what's the threshold? Is it 300 grams? Is it 200 grams? When do you guys prefer I send an email and communicate what's going on and get the support ticket going? It's really important what Metrc wants. The people that you're calling on the phone with Metrc, the ones that you might be afraid to call, they just want transparency. They don't want you lying to them. They don't want you making things up or being deceiving. Because once you start acting shady, you can't act shady. You're regulated and you don't want to get in trouble. It's just interesting sometimes how people react. Regulators can see those repeated adjustments and think it's a diversion risk. That's why I'm telling you to be transparent with Metrc. And when you have a large adjustment, reach out to them. Don't be afraid. Don't just bury a 500 gram adjustment or a 200 gram adjustment. And don't make the adjustment. Reach out to them first. And this is why you should run reports weekly in your facility. The Metrc inventory person, if there's just one Metrc person, then the owner should be running reports and making sure they're watching what's going on. If you have an employee and they're just one person's handling all your Metrc, if there's multiple people, then that person that oversees all those multiple people, they should be running the Metrc adjustments report weekly to at least at a minimum every 2 weeks. So you can catch things and they don't compile, right? And you can address it and you can reach out to Metrc and you're not reaching out to Metrc 6 months later because that can look pretty shady, right? Here's another one. These are ones personally that I've witnessed happening. Sales not getting pushed properly and reported. This can land you in a lot of trouble. And in fact, I've seen it land people in trouble in multiple states where a year went by and they never checked to see if the sales were getting pushed. Never. They never went into the sales tab in Metrc to make sure that sales are being finalized in the Metrc system. It's very clear. One column says not finalized and another column says finalized. And so it's your responsibility to make sure sales are getting pushed through. I had this happen with a client where the POS system, there was something going on with the integration. They're not always going to catch it. You just cannot 100% rely on the POS system. I'm not trying to beat up the POS systems that are out there, but there are good POS systems out there. And sometimes there's issues that happen where the sales don't get pushed through. And then you're held accountable. The regulators aren't going to go after that POS company. They're going to come after you. They're going to say, you're the owner. You decided to use that POS software. You didn't go in and look to make sure sales were getting pushed through. And then on top of that, it creates a tax issue with you reporting sales and making sure that you're paying the right amount of taxes to the state and the local municipality. So it can cause a lot of issues. Unfinished packages or negative packages, that's another issue that happens. So inventory mismatches are rarely theft, and it's just really about making sure that you have the right processes in place. So tagging package errors, common mistakes that I see in the system is wrong item category, incorrect unit of measure. I think for the most part, though, everyone's really good about each versus grams. Inconsistent naming conventions, this one's a hot mess. I'm not going to lie. This one, it can get crazy out there with naming conventions. It's how you enter things into your system. It's that saying, bad data in, bad data out. It can really be confusing when you're receiving inventory. And here's the thing, everyone says that the POS system is fully integrated with Metrc. Every software will tell you that. We're fully integrated with Metrc. All your inventory is going to be there. You don't have to do anything. It's just not true. I've launched a lot of dispensaries and I have sat there for 12 to 15 hours helping clients get all their inventory put into the system. When you're launching a facility, it's not in there. It's connected to Metrc. You can see it, but you still have to bring it over. You still have to bring it over, and then you have to make sure it's named appropriately, right? Because, for example, if you're going to have a live menu at your dispensary, is it named how the vendor named it? What if they're using acronyms or abbreviations for things? Are your customers going to be able to understand that on the live menu? Also, how are you organizing all your inventory for the bud tenders and ringing things in and to make things searchable and making sure things are labeled appropriately? Because different things have different milligrams, flavors. You have brand names. Is the brand name going to be first? Naming conventions are everything. I think when you're on the manufacturing side, you definitely have to be a little tighter. On the grow, not so much unless you're prepackaged and you're going direct to the dispensary and that's direct to consumer. Bulk, not, it's really not so much, but dispensaries are the most affected by it because those naming conventions are potentially going to be shown on your live menu. Samples, I see this all the time. I'll go to a live menu and it'll say sample. And it just shows me that they didn't have their system set up appropriately, right? They didn't have like samples, for example, samples come to the dispensaries so staff can try the different products so they can recommend it to consumers, right? The customers never see the samples. It's really just for the person who's doing the ordering or the manager or the owner. They try the samples. They accept it on the sales floor, the samples, and they didn't push them back to the vault. Sales floor, that's going to usually be on your menu, and the vault, those products aren't going to show on your menu. So you can just tell when somebody has their product in the right place if you just look at their menu. All of a sudden you see samples. It's not in the right place in the POS system and it wasn't named properly. Tags not physically attached to product. There's no process for closing out tags and tags get lost. And I would say tags could definitely get lost. I've seen some pretty creative ways so they don't lose their tags. Those shoe holders that go in the back of doors with pockets. I've seen people put all their Metrc tags in the shoe holder in the back of the door. I've seen the little U-line, the tiny little boxes that all clip together and they'll be 20, 30, almost like little mailboxes that you would see like for a college campus. And then each box is a vendor and those are all the tags because they have to get closed out, right? You're a Metrc person. You can't just throw them away. They have to take the tag and make sure it gets finished, right, in the system, and then it can get thrown away or shredded. I have clients that are afraid to even throw them away, that they have bags and they're just saving them for 2 years in case they need them for anything. It can basically cause a ripple effect. So one wrong package can affect your transfers, your sales, and your financial reporting. Like I said, bad data in is bad data out. So we want good data in means good information that's coming out. Bad data and Metrc, it doesn't stay small and it can spread. I want to talk about transfer and manifest mistakes. Here are some frequent errors. Wrong package IDs on manifest. I'm trying to think of different examples. Somebody recently called me and by mistake, their employees, they're entering in the batch ID and they weren't, somehow the Metrc tag wasn't associated with the product, it's really important that the identifying tag number stays with that product. Like I said, you have to bring things over. You still have to go in and create the items in your POS. It's just not going to appear. It's going to come over and transfer over from Metrc to your POS system, but you still have to go in there and create the products the first time you launch your facility. It's not going to be in there. Once you launch and it's in there, it's going to be in there for you to access. And then you just go in and update it or edit it. But if it's all brand new stuff, that product has to get created. I would also say with transfers, one of my biggest pet peeves is not accepting product right away. I went in and did an audit of a facility and found a package that was never received in Metrc, and it sat there for 3 months. You cannot do that. You cannot have products sit there. It's your responsibility to reconcile at the end of the business day, which means you're reconciling your inventory, you're accepting all your deliveries. When a delivery comes in, you should inspect it, you should count it, you should make sure that everything is on there, or you can reject the package. But you don't want to get 3 months down the road when you're fighting with your vendor, and now you've got this product sitting in your system for 3 months. It just doesn't look good, and it can cause a ripple effect. You have to accept and finalize those transfers. I would say for manifest, I think at this day and age, the manifest, I think it's a little hard to make mistakes on the manifest other than maybe the directions aren't really good. It will not let you do anything without adding in notes and information. It will not let you move forward to the next step and manifest. I think depending on the state that you're in, like what's happening in Colorado, and every state is different, is that they're allowed to do digital manifest here now. And what I have found is some of the delivery companies, they're not printing out the manifest when they're delivering the product. And sometimes you get an invoice, but it doesn't have the tag number on it. And then it makes it really challenging to check in the order. And I like having the manifest, especially if I'm a dispensary. If you just had a $5,000 delivery with multiple SKUs, and then the invoice doesn't have the tag numbers, how can you verify and check things in the appropriate way? I have come across it being challenging. And that, to me, that's a mistake I'm seeing with the manifest. It's making it hard to check things in efficiently to see if you're missing it. This might not be happening in every state, but I know since they went to the digital manifest, it's been an issue in Colorado. A lot of these issues can turn out results with rejected transfers, potential product holds, and enforcement actions. And from a regulator's perspective, a bad manifest can look like a diversion even when it isn't. That's the thing, is like, for all of us working on the ground floor and working in these cannabis operations, you just have like your perspective, how you're seeing things or understanding things. Sometimes we don't get the outside view, the broader view, and what it might be saying to the regulator. I used to work in these facilities. I feel like now that I'm out of them and not running them, I have a whole completely different perspective than when I was in them. When I was in them, I was busy. I was putting out fires. I was running around like crazy. It was nonstop all the time. And it's challenging. You're wearing a lot of hats, and compliance is challenging. That's why I can relate to operators and employees in this industry and the challenges that they're up against. But now that I'm not doing that anymore, I can see the regulator's perspective and the glass that they're looking through at the situation and what might appear to them, even though that's not your intention, right? Your intention is not to divert and not break the law. You have to remember, a lot of times the regulators, they're trained to be investigators. They're trained to look for signs that show that something might be happening under the surface, which would cause them to dig deeper. The next section I want to talk about is late or missing reporting. Common issues that I see are sales not being reported within the required timeframes. I know I talked a little bit about that. Sales not getting finalized, something going on with the integration between the POS system and the seed to sale tracking system. Waste not being logged properly or not logged at all. Harvests that are being entered in late, and then staff waiting till the end of the week or a month to reconcile some of these systems. It's really, I know I laugh because it's so wild. The seed to sale tracking systems have evolved in 10 years. And when I was running these facilities, I first got on Metrc in 2013. I feel like I'm such a dinosaur in this industry. 2013 is when I first learned Metrc. And man, oh man, whew, it is like night and day. Thank goodness for those who are using it now that you didn't have to suffer through Metrc in 2013. A lot of hand entering in RFID tag numbers, which I believe are like 24, 25 characters. It's a lot of work. So some of the risk, Metrc timestamps everything. It's litigation, right? Everything is tracked. That's the whole point of it, is track and trace from seed to sale, from seed to customer till it goes out the door and out of chain of custody in your control. So patterns of late reporting are easy for regulators to see. Automation fails don't excuse the non-compliance, like I mentioned earlier. So my next piece I want to talk about is access control issues. I believe this is one of the reasons why this is the number one violation across the United States. I think not everybody that is the person in charge of doing Metrc for that company, they shouldn't be in that role. And the reason is because they're not good at it. And that's the truth. And then the other issue is a lot of times people don't even get the opportunity to know if they're good or not at using Metrc because they never get trained. Or there's a lot of turnover, or they're thrown into it, or they're trained by somebody else who wasn't doing things correctly. I can't tell you how many times I go into a facility and I just sit there and go, what were you doing? I was in a facility where they were not closing out their harvest batches until they thought somebody was going to buy the flower. And once they knew somebody was interested in buying the flower, they then closed the harvest batch and then sent it off to testing. So it looked like they had no product in their system because everything was open harvest batches. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And so I just don't understand. I think just people get in there and they do the best that they can and they don't take the training, they don't take the time. And it's really important to take the training and to work with somebody if you have to work with a third-party company to come in and help you. So here's the human factor with these access control and training issues. One, too many users. Now, if you're a big cultivation facility, like 50,000 square feet, oh my God, and you're going to have 100,000 square feet, and you have to have a lot of people. But you should have this group of people are doing the veg, this group of people when it gets moved over from veg to flower, and then these guys are going to be handling all the harvesting, and then these guys are going to be managing the packaging, and you could split it up that way, but then you all have to communicate. I've seen cultivations split it up that way, but everyone should be communicating so we're not having multiple different things. That's where the challenge can come in, is if no one's communicating and they're not having meetings and there's not one person overseeing and going and looking at the system, we just have these landmines that are deeply buried in the Metrc system that are going on. And there are people who harvest once a week that grow 30,000 plants. My goodness, there's a lot of inventory. Another thing I see is there's no SOP, there's no training. Employees are guessing. It is like Russian roulette that's happening, and they're not asking and they don't have the proper support. Some of these employees don't even know that there's all this free training online from Metrc. I'm talking beyond what's on YouTube. I know there's like a YouTube and there's a lot of videos that people watch, but I'm talking about when you log on to the system, there's a whole learning center in there. Also, just giving Metrc access without accountability and nobody taking ownership or being trained properly, you just can't do that. It's just you're setting yourself up for failure in your business. Every Metrc user, let this sink in. Every Metrc user is a compliance risk or an asset. That's up to you and how you implement training and what systems and structure you have in place in your business. So, how to stay audit ready? I go in these facilities a lot and I do a lot of remote audits and on-site audits. And these are a lot of the common mistakes. And I obviously we only have an hour to talk about this today. So I can only really just scratch the surface here. I feel like there could just be like a deep dive just on each category and like just do an episode. Let's just talk about transfers today. Let's just talk about adjustments. Let's just talk about sales or employees, and each section would be an hour. But I just wanted to come on and talk a little bit about it today. I'm seeing a lot of stuff out there in these facilities, and my 5 core recommendations: daily inventory reconciliation. I know it can be challenging, especially if you work a 12-hour day or 10-hour day, but you have to reconcile your inventory every day. You have to have clear SOPs for every metric function. Take advantage of the Universal Metric Guide and take advantage of your state supplemental guide. You can download it in Metrc, free to download. Make sure you're checking that SOP. And also, you can take that information from the supplemental guide and incorporate it into your SOPs as well. You want to limit user access. In some states, you're required to have all your employees in Metrc so you can report them to the state. You don't have to give them every single permission in the Metrc system, right? You can just give them sales and you don't really need to give them anything else. Just limit how many people have their hands in the pot. I've seen it. It lessens the issues in Metrc. It's a lot easier to track what's going on. Train before granting any kind of Metrc permissions. You have to do this. You want to make sure someone's trained properly. And you have to treat Metrc like a compliance system. It's not an admin task. It's certainly not a point of sale system, right? That's not what it is. It is a compliance system. It's a way for you to see everything that's going on, especially on the dispensary side. Obviously, grows and manufacturing, it's all internal. It's not going directly to the public. And I would add, I know I said 5 recommendations. I would add another one on there, honestly, and run your reports. It's really important to run a report on adjustments, see what's going on, making sure that people aren't making crazy adjustments and you're not being told about it as an owner. And even for managers, any managers that are listening to this episode today, you guys should be running reports and just see what's going on in the system weekly, especially if there's multiple people in there. It's a great way to see if other people are making mistakes so you can catch them. Most Metrc violations are preventable. That $40,000 violation I talked about in Colorado that was in December, I read through the whole thing. It just breaks my heart. I sat there and thought, $40,000, they could have brought me online, and let's just say they could have invested $5,000, and because it was multiple licenses, it just wasn't one license. It was multiple locations. They could have invested $5,000 to have somebody come in and audit the whole facility, give them a report, put together a action report on what they need to do to get it fixed, or hire somebody come in to do a clean and fix everything and get it in order, and they could have avoided $40,000. But instead, what I find is that people don't want to spend the $5,000 or they don't want to spend $2,000. Obviously, when you have more licenses, it gets a little more expensive. But people, they don't want to spend the money to have outside eyes come in and find out where all the compliance gaps are. And that's the Russian roulette. Am I going to get caught? Am I not going to get caught? And it's not even like you're intentionally doing anything wrong, but you're not having it checked out. You're not even taking the step to say, I want to make sure that we're doing everything right. I work with small to mid-size operators who have businesses in up to 5 states as well. I see people who just have one dispensary, family owned, and they're like, every 4 months, can you come do an audit? Hey, we just had some turnover. Employee turnover? Can you come through the facility and do an audit and go in and check our metric? And it's not like they're millionaires. This dispensary is not bringing in millions of dollars every month, but they don't want to risk it. They don't want to risk their business. They don't want to play Russian roulette and say, we'll just see, maybe if the regulators catch it, maybe they will, maybe they won't. They don't even think about it. They just think about, when can I get another audit just to make sure we're okay? So that it's like you want to be in that mentality with your business. It's like an oil change. You make sure you have air in your tires. You make sure you put gas in your car. You make sure that your car has oil and that your radiator has fluid. You look under the hood of your car. You look under the hood of your business. And that's what you should do to close the gap on that risk exposure. If you're not doing all these things that I talked about today and have the systems in place, your risk exposure is larger. You're at a higher risk of getting a violation and getting in trouble in your facility, especially if you have turnover, if the owners aren't in this facility understanding what's fully going on. I want to leave you with this is, it depends on the state that you're in. If you're really interested in getting heavily involved in Metrc, they have Metrc user groups. So let me say that again. Metrc has these, what they call Metrc user group. They have them in several states, not all of them. So you can reach out to your rep for your state and you say, hey, how do I get involved? Do you have a Metrc user group? We have one in Colorado. I'm in the Metrc user group in Colorado. There's one in Michigan. Some of them are strict where you actually have to be employed or an operator. They won't let the consultants in the Metrc user groups. But it's a really good way to, one, tell Metrc, here's all the things that aren't working. Can we change this? Here are the things that we're missing or that we need. We wish Metrc could do this. And it's a great way to be involved to get the system to work better for you in your state. So I highly recommend, if there's a Metrc user group, to go out there and find if that exists in your state. Another piece, Metrc education. If you put in Google Metrc Learn, it will bring you to the Metrc site and you have to log in with your credentials and it will take you to the Metrc Learning Center where you can watch all the free videos and get all the content, all the training, everything that you can. And as an owner, you should require your inventory person, your Metrc inventory manager, whoever's doing your Metrc, that they should take training every quarter, every 3 to 4 months, and making sure that they're on top of any Metrc updates, any changes, anything going on in the system, and they should be taking that training. It's free. It's free. As a manager, you can schedule it. You can tell ownership, I'm taking Metrc training. I can't be available for this time, and get it on your calendar and make time for it. Also, too, if you want to go beyond the Metrc training, you can work with a company like mine. We come in and we help. We do training. We do remote training. We walk through people's systems. We set it up. We also do Metrc cleans where we come in and clean up the whole system and we help people with mitigation, basically. And there's lots of companies out there that do it, not just myself. You could work with anyone you want to work with, but you can work with a third-party company that could come in and help you get over the hump or go the extra mile and go above and beyond. So those are some things that you can do when it comes to Metrc inventory system. So just remember, good data in means good data out, which means good for everybody. It's good for everybody. Good for you, good for the regulators. We want to stay in compliance We want to be this kind of well-oiled machine in your business. Hopefully, this was a really timely topic and this was helpful today. I'm going to be wrapping up now. I would love feedback if there's really something specifically that, as an employee or an operator, you're looking for more information. You can always reach out. I'm always appreciative of it. I'm here to provide education and help operators and employees be successful in the cannabis industry. And that's my goal of my podcast. So thank you everyone for joining me today. For anyone who streams the podcast, it is available on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. And please, if you could help me out and go to my YouTube channel, I would love the support. It's Under the Microscope with Jenny on YouTube. And if you could go and subscribe, that would be wonderful. I appreciate everyone. Let's rock 2026. I'm really excited. I've got a lot of amazing shows that I'm mapping out, and I have guests that I'm planning and different topics. And so I'm excited to take on 2026 with everyone. So thanks again for tuning in. Take care.